My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple. Can't get any simpler than that. So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? We're going to produce the cars and ships, chips, airplanes, minerals, and medicines that we need right here in America. The pharmaceutical companies are going to become roaring back. They're coming roaring back. They're all coming back to our country because if they don't, they got a big tax to pay. If we're going to build our future with American hands, with American heart, American steel, and we're going to build it with American pride like we used to.
So on April 2nd, President Trump decided to really shake things up, huh? Increase tariffs worldwide. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. We're diving deep today, trying to figure out what this all means, for you, for your investments, the prices you pay at the store even, and what it means for the direction of the country as a whole.
Big stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been doing our homework. We've gone through reports from all the major players, CBS News, PBS NewsHour, FOX, NBC News, you name it, Reuters, MSNBC, The Wall Street Journal, all of them, to try to paint the most complete picture possible for you. Our goal today, we're going to try to cut through all the noise and really understand how these tariffs could potentially impact things, right? The stock market, how we live our lives day to day, and the development of the U.S. in the long run. I mean, right out of the gate, though, gotta ask, Wall Street, how'd they take the news? I'm guessing not so well.
Not so well is putting it lightly. I mean, NBC News was reporting a pretty steep, like a really broad downturn right after the announcement. Significant drops everywhere you look. Dow Jones down over 4%, the S&P 500 down around 5%, and then the NASDAQ got hit even harder, about 6%.
I mean, those are some serious numbers. Those are the kind of numbers you normally see with
yeah,
huge events, crises. I remember reading somewhere it was like the worst day for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ since, remember the early days of COVID, like the really crazy volatile times.
Yeah.
Gives you a sense of how big of a deal this is.
Yeah.
And CBS News mentioned that this sell-off wiped out $2 trillion. $2 trillion in market value. Just in one day.
Yeah.
That's a number so big, it's almost impossible to even imagine, So what was behind that kind of instant panic? What were people freaking out about?
Well, I think what's really interesting here is how fast it happened. And it wasn't just like a little dip here and there. It was everywhere. That's what really makes you sit up and take notice.
Yeah.
It signaled that investors were instantly worried about global trade getting messed up and about lots of companies facing way higher costs. Because that's what tariffs are, right? Like a tax on stuff we buy from other countries. And for companies that rely on that stuff, well, their profits take a hit unless they can make consumers pay more, which.
Which brings us to the whole question of what this means for us regular folks buying groceries and all that. We'll definitely get to that. But for now, let's stick with the market for a minute. It wasn't just the overall indexes that were affected, right? Some companies probably got hit harder than others, depending on what they do.
Oh, yeah, for sure. CBS News pointed to companies with these really complex global supply chains, lots of moving parts all over the world, as being the most vulnerable. A good example is Nvidia. They're a big deal in the chip world, right? And they rely heavily on Taiwan for semiconductors. And guess what? Taiwan's now looking at a potential 32% tariff. So their stock took a pretty big hit after hours. Same thing happened to Apple, and it makes sense. Most of their iPhones are made in China, where they're also expecting some hefty tariffs.
Right. So the market's basically saying, hey, these guys are going to have to pay more to do business. Things are going to get disrupted, and that's going to hurt their profits. It makes sense that the companies that are the most global, with all these international connections, would be the ones feeling the most pressure right away. What about the big picture, though, the overall mood among investors? Was it just a quick freak out that settled down, or are people still nervous about the future?
It seems like there's still a lot of uncertainty. It goes beyond that initial shock. CBS News was saying investors are now trying to figure out if even more tariffs are coming. Pharmaceuticals and lumber were mentioned as possibilities, so who knows what's next? All right. And then there's the huge question of how much it'll cost companies to move their manufacturing back to the U.S. That kind of stuff, those big investments, they don't pay off right away. And investors, they usually want to see results quickly.
So it's a gamble. You might have pain in the short term. You have to invest for maybe a bigger payoff down the line, more stuff made in America. But you're right, Wall Street, they're not known for their patience. Something else that really struck me, CBS News also talked about how Wall Street is connecting these tariffs to, well, what it means for regular people, Main Street, the rest of us.
It's crucial to understand that link, yeah. And those big drops in the market, yeah, they're scary. But CBS pointed out that in the past, the really long-lasting downturns, the ones that really hurt, those have usually been tied to things like consumers losing confidence or even something called negative inflation, which basically means prices are going down. And that's actually a bad sign. It means the economy is slowing down. People aren't buying stuff. So the fact that the market reacted so strongly to the tariffs, it suggests that Wall Street isn't just worried about companies making less money. They're worried that these tariffs are going to mess with the entire economy,
Right.
that it could trickle down and hit consumers hard. And that's what really tanks the economy.
It's that domino effect, right? You make imports more expensive, that means prices go up for consumers, and when prices go up, people stop spending, and the whole economy could slow down. But President Trump, well, he's singing a different tune. NBC News reported that he's way more optimistic about this whole thing, like way more.
Oh yeah, he's very confident that these policies are going to be a huge success for the markets, for the country. He even said, get this, trillions of dollars, trillions are going to be invested in the U.S. because of these tariffs. Like, it's going to be this huge boom.
It's like a total opposite take to what we saw in the market's reaction, right? And MSNBC pointed out that a lot of experts, well, they're not buying it. They're skeptical.
Yeah, and MSNBC quoted experts saying that the market's drop is actually a sign that people are realizing, okay, Trump's serious about these tariffs.
Right.
And that introduces a whole lot of uncertainty and risk into the economy. Markets hate uncertainty. So you've got this clash, right? The administration saying everything's going to be amazing, and the market's saying, hold on, this could get rough. It makes you wonder who's going to end up being right.
Big time. Okay, so we've looked at the initial fallout, the money stuff, and the different opinions on what it all means. But now let's zoom out a little bit. How could these tariffs impact society? I mean, real people's lives, the prices we pay for things, our jobs, just our overall financial well-being. CBS News talked about how this could make people more anxious about prices going up and how that anxiety could lead to even more problems.
Right. The thinking is these tariffs are probably going to make people more worried about the cost of living. At the end of the day, companies import stuff.
Right?
And now that stuff's going to cost more because of the tariffs. So what are they going to do? They're going to try to pass those costs on to us, the consumers. So that means we're going to end up paying more for all sorts of everyday things.
And MSNBC actually dug deeper into this with some data from the Yale Budget Lab. And their analysis was pretty eye-opening when it comes to just how much more expensive things could get for certain groups of people.
Yeah, and what's really alarming is that it seems like lower income American households are going to get hit the hardest. The Yale Budget Lab said these families could be spending an extra, on average, like $1,700 a year. Now, by itself, maybe that doesn't sound like a ton of money, but think about it. For families who are already struggling to make ends meet, that's about 4% of their entire disposable income. That's way more than richer folks are going to feel it. So, yeah, it's a big deal.
That puts it in perspective. An extra $1,700 a year, if you're already living paycheck to paycheck, that could really throw things off. And then MSNBC took it a step further, and they connected this potential price hike on everything to another really big problem in the U.S. Healthcare costs. They're already out of control for a lot of people.
It's all connected, right? MSNBC was citing this Gallup survey, and it showed that a record number of Americans are already saying they can't afford the medicine or the medical care they need. It's a crisis. And the worry is that if everyday stuff starts getting more expensive because of these tariffs, it's going to make that healthcare crisis even worse. Families are going to be forced to make even tougher choices about their health and their finances.
It's a pretty bleak picture for a lot of people, but, there's always two sides to every story. One of the main arguments for these tariffs, something we've heard from President Trump a lot, and that was also reported by Liv Now W from FOX, is that they're going to be great for American manufacturing, bring jobs back to the U.S. That's the hope anyway.
Right. President Trump's been really vocal about this. He actually called the day he announced the tariffs Liberation Day for American industry. He's predicting a big comeback for manufacturing jobs all over the country. The idea is if you make imported goods more expensive, companies are going to want to start making stuff here in the U.S. again to avoid those tariffs.
And PBS NewsHour also covered this angle. But they also talked to some economists who weren't so sure about this whole jobs boom prediction. They had some good counterarguments.
Yeah, I mean, bringing back American manufacturing, that sounds great, right? But the economists interviewed by PBS NewsHour, they said, hold on a second, this is complicated. They pointed out that rebuilding our industrial base, that's a huge project. It's going to take a lot of time and a ton of investment. New infrastructure, new technology, job training, all of that. And then there's the whole automation thing, right? Even if companies do start making more stuff in the U.S., are they going to need a ton of workers? With robots and AI doing so much of the work these days, it might not create as many jobs as people think.
So it's not as simple as tariffs go up, jobs come back. The whole manufacturing landscape has changed. The Wall Street Journal also chimed in on this, and they were worried about businesses having to pay more and about potential job losses in what they call downstream industries. Can you explain what that means? I'm not sure everyone's familiar with that term.
Sure. So downstream industries are basically businesses that rely on those imported goods or parts that are now going to cost more because of the tariffs. Imagine, for example, a car company here in the U.S. They might import steel from overseas or maybe some electronic components. If those things get more expensive, the car company's costs go up, right? So they either have to raise the price of their cars, which could mean they sell fewer cars, or they have to eat those costs, which means less profit, and that could lead to job cuts within the company. So the point is, yeah, some jobs might come back in the industries that are directly protected by the tariffs, but other industries, the ones that use those more expensive imports, they could end up suffering. It's all interconnected.
Yeah, it's complicated, right? Like pushing on one part of the system can have ripple effects everywhere else. And this isn't just an American story, right? Reuters talked about how other countries are reacting to this whole tariff situation.
Yeah, and it makes sense that other countries are paying attention, right?
Right.
Leaders in Australia, Italy, all over, they've expressed some serious concerns. They're worried about how this is going to affect the global economy. They're worried about their own industries that export stuff to the U.S. These tariffs are going to make it harder for them to do business with us. And that could lead to job losses in their countries, too. It shows how interconnected we all are, right?
Yeah.
And it raises the possibility of retaliation. What if they start putting tariffs on our goods? It could spiral out of control.
Yeah, it's like a big tangled web of potential consequences, and it stretches across the whole world. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the bigger picture.
Okay.
What do these tariffs mean for the U.S. in the long run? For how our country develops. Live Now from FOX reported that President Trump is looking back at history to try to justify his belief that this is the right approach.
Yeah, he specifically said that he believes the U.S. was at its strongest, economically speaking, back when we relied more heavily on tariffs. He was talking about the period between 1789 and 1913. He seems to think that these tariffs are going to bring back some kind of golden age of America like it was back then.
And he's also been talking a lot about reciprocal tariffs. Live Now from FOX explained that too. It's not just about putting tariffs on everything across the board. It's more targeted. It's about what other countries are doing to us.
Right. So the idea behind reciprocal tariffs is basically this. If a country charges us, say, a 20% tariff to sell their cars in the U.S., well, we're going to turn around and charge them something similar, maybe 10% or so, to sell our cars in their country. It's about trying to create a more level playing field in terms of trade. He gave some specific examples, too, like the U.S. has pretty low tariffs on motorcycles, but countries like Thailand, India, Vietnam, they have really high tariffs on motorcycles coming in from the U.S. Same thing with cars. The EU and India, they have higher tariffs on our cars than we do on theirs. So he's saying, look, this isn't fair. We need to even things out.
And it wasn't just about the economics. Live Now from FOX also reported that the administration is arguing that these tariffs are important for national security.
Right. The argument is that when we have these big trade deficits, it makes us too dependent on other countries for important things we need, like antibiotics, all the computer stuff we use, smartphones, even ships. And they're saying that this dependence could be a big problem if things get messy on the world stage. Like, what if there's a conflict somewhere? We could be really vulnerable if our supply chains get disrupted or if other countries try to use that dependence against us. So the tariffs are a way to protect ourselves, they say.
Live Now W from FOX also had this really interesting list of big companies that have recently announced plans to invest a lot of money in the U.S. And they were saying that these tariffs are at least partly responsible for those decisions. It's like they're saying, see, it's working already.
Yeah, it's true. Companies like Apple, SoftBank, Oracle, Nvidia, TSMC, Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly, Meta, Merck, they're all making big bets on the U.S. And the administration is basically saying that these companies are doing this because of the tariffs. Like they're moving their production here or expanding their operations here so they don't have to pay those extra taxes on stuff made overseas.
So they're using these investments as proof that their tariff policy is already bringing economic activity back to the U.S. But some analysts, like the ones quoted in CBS News and the Wall Street Journal, they're saying this might be part of an even bigger strategy, something much more ambitious, something that could really shake things up globally.
Yeah, some people are saying this isn't just about protecting American jobs or evening out the playing field. They're saying the real goal is to completely change how global supply chains work, to basically reshape the entire global economic system. And that would be huge. It would mean moving away from the whole free trade model that's been in place since after World War II. But CBS News and the Wall Street Journal, they both said that there's just so much uncertainty about what that would actually look like and what the long-term consequences would be. I mean, it could trigger trade wars. Other countries could retaliate. It's a risky move for sure.
And the Wall Street Journal had this fascinating historical example about how hard it is to get rid of tariffs once they're in place. It was about the chicken war. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the chicken war. Classic example. So back in the 1960s, there was this whole dispute between the U.S. and Europe about chicken exports. And it led to the U.S. putting tariffs on trucks imported from Europe. And get this, those truck tariffs are still in effect today. They've been around for over 50 years, way after the original chicken problem was resolved. And that just shows you how these things can become really entrenched. Domestic industries start relying on them. They lobby to keep them. They become bargaining chips in future trade deals. It's really hard to get rid of them once they're there.
Yeah, history has a way of repeating itself, right? And that's definitely something to think about. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground today looking at the possible impacts of these new tariffs. It's a lot to digest.
It is. We talked about how the stock market reacted, the initial panic and uncertainty. We talked about how this could make things more expensive for consumers, especially for families that are already struggling. And we talked about how it could impact American manufacturing and the whole global economy in the long run. Lots of big questions.
And I think the big takeaway here is that this is a really, really big deal. It's a major policy shift with a lot of potential consequences, and even the experts don't agree on what those consequences might be.
Exactly. There are strong arguments on both sides, and the reality is we don't know for sure how it's all going to play out. It depends on how other countries react, how businesses adapt, how consumers respond. It's a complex situation.
So here's a final thought for you all to chew on. Are these tariffs just about trade? Or are they the first step in a much bigger plan? Are we witnessing a shift away from the whole globalized, interconnected world we've gotten used to? Is this the beginning of a new America First approach to economics, where we're less focused on global cooperation and more focused on, well, doing our own thing? If that's the case, what are the potential benefits? And maybe more importantly, what are the risks? These are big, big questions, and we all need to be thinking about them. And hey, if you found this deep dive into the world of tariffs insightful, and you want to stay informed on complex issues like this, don't forget to subscribe and share our channel. We'll keep digging into the stuff that matters. We'll see you next time.